We will be talking about the movie Parasite on today's episode of Everyday Movie Recap. The fancy Park family and the poor Kim clan are having a very delicate relationship that works both ways, but now greed and class discrimination are stopping the party. Okay, everyone, fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a wild ride. It's time to start the exciting and uncertain story of what's going to happen. The Kim family lives in a small room in Seoul, and it's like a basement. Father Ki-taek, mother Chung-suk, daughter Ki-young, and son Ki-woo all fold pizza boxes for very little pay and have a hard time making ends meet. So, they do things like put their phones next to the bathroom window to steal Wi-Fi or leave their windows open so that the fumigator's deadly smoke can get into the house and kill the bugs, even if it makes them breathe it in. In the evening, Ki-woo's friend Min Hyuk comes over and gives them a scholar's rock from his grandfather's collection. This stone is thought to bring wealth. Besides that, he gives Ki-woo a job. As soon as Min Hyuk goes on a trip abroad, he wants Ki-woo to teach the daughter of a very wealthy family instead of him. After being in the service for a while and taking the test 4 times, Ki-woo knows a lot about English. Since she's good at design programs, Ki-young can just fake his papers to make it look like he's a college student. His bosses probably won't even look at them closely. Since getting the wife's approval is very easy, getting Min Hyuk's approval should be enough. In his best clothes and with the fake paper in his hand, Ki-woo goes to the Park family's home in a fancy part of the city. Cho Yeo-jong, who is also known as Mrs. Park, questions him after the housekeeper, Guk Moon-gwang, lets him in. She believes Min Hyuk's words and doesn't look at the paperwork much, as expected. However, she wants to sit through the first lesson to see if Ki-woo is a good man. Da-hai at first is very shy, and she gets shocked when Ki-woo grabs her wrist. But she quickly warms up to him when he explains the exercise to her in a way she understands. The things Mrs. Park has seen make her happy, so she hires Ki-woo and pays him well. He also gets to meet her son, Da-song, after the first class. Da-song is in the Scouts and loves playing Indians. Ki-woo really gets it because he was a scout himself, and he gets an idea when Mrs. Park shows him her son's pictures. He starts to talk about Da-song's art as if it were a real masterpiece. When Mrs. Park says she needs a new art teacher because the last ones didn't last more than a month, Ki-woo suggests Jessica, an art therapist who is his cousin's teacher. He's really talking about his sister, who also shows up for an interview the next day, pretending to be Jessica's teacher after reading online about art therapy and psychology. Ki-woo helps Da-hai with his work while Mrs. Park talks to her. Da-hai is envious that Ki-woo was friends with the art teacher. After telling her he's not interested in her, Ki-woo gives her a kiss. Going back to Ki-young, she talks Mrs. Park into letting her teach Da-song his first lesson by herself. When the lesson is over, she shows Mrs. Park how well-behaved her son is now, which makes her speechless. She also tells Mrs. Park about something that happened to Da-song in the first grade that shows on his drawings that he has been traumatized. Mrs. Park hires Ki-young for a lot of money because she thinks her son needs art therapy. That night, she meets Park Dong-ik, the family father, and tells Yoon to drive Ki-young to her house. Yoon wants to drop her at her house, but she asks him to leave her at the train station because she has to meet someone. She does this to hide the fact that she lives in a poor area. Ki-young has an idea while they are driving and takes off her underwear to hide them in the car. The Kim family starts to eat better now that their kids are making more money while they plan their next move. At the same time, Mr. Park finds the underwear in the car and thinks Yoon has been having affairs and maybe even using drugs in the car, since no one would ever forget their underwear in a car. When Ki-young goes for the day, Mrs. Park asks her what she thinks of the driver. Ki-young tells Mrs. Park that Yoon tried to take her home instead of the station. Mrs. Park thinks that Yoon should be fired so that they don't start a scandal. This is when Ki-young steps in and says that a more experienced worker is more reliable before suggesting her uncle's old driver. This man is, of course, Ki-taek. He used to be a driver when he was younger. He gives Mr. Park a test drive, and Mr. Park is amazed by how nice he is and how well he knows the city. He doesn't need GPS to get there. He is such a smooth driver that Mr. Park doesn't even spill his drink when the car turns. That's why he quickly hired him. Most of the plan is easy until the very end. Moon-gwang, a stubborn and smart woman, has been working there since the last family owned the house. Because Moon-gwang is allergic to peaches, Da-hai tells Ki-woo that they can't have them in the house. So, he and Ki-young start throwing peach fuzz at her while she's not looking. In the end, Moon-gwang visits a doctor because she doesn't believe it is an allergy. Ki-taek goes with her as planned. He takes a snap with Moon-gwang in the background and then shows Mrs. Park the picture while telling her that he heard Moon-gwang say she has tuberculosis. He makes it look like Moon-gwang coughed up blood by putting ketchup on the tissues in the trash when she coughs at home because of her allergies. Having a sick worker in the house is a shame. Mrs. Park tells Ki-taek she quits and makes him promise not to tell her husband. She then fires Moon-gwang and gives him some reason. Mr. Park starts to worry that his wife isn't cooking or cleaning, so Ki-taek gives him the business card of a well-known agency where he almost got a job. This lets Mr. Park tell his wife where he got the idea. It's said that this business helps families find trustworthy workers, but it's really just another trick the Kims are pulling. When Mrs. Park calls, she acts like a secretary and asks for a lot of official papers. The phone number on the card is a second number Ki-young got for this. Chung-suk is finally hired as the new maid, and the Kim family moves in. They figure out that it's not the soap that makes them smell the same, it's the smell of their old, cheap apartment. The Park's family goes camping one day, leaving Chung-suk to watch over the house. As soon as they leave, the Kim family comes over to stay for a while. They stay in every room, eat every meal, and drink every expensive wine. Ki-woo even steals Da-hai's book to read because he wants to ask her to marry him when she gets into college. As the Kims eat dinner, the storm outside makes them think about what it would be like to marry into a wealthy family. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. It's Moon Gwang. She says she forgot something in the basement when she quickly quit her job and left. Chung-suk lets her in while her family hides, but Moon Gwang is taking too long down there, so Chung-suk goes to see what's going on. When she sees Moon Gwang having trouble moving a cabinet, she helps her. Behind the cabinet is a door that goes to an underground bunker that the architect and previous owner built. Yes, Gun-se, Moon Gwang's husband, has been living there for years to avoid loan sharks. When the previous owner moved out, Moon Gwang helped him move in while the house was being sold. The Parks never found out about the cave. She came today because she knew the Parks would be closed. She wanted to talk to Chung-suk by herself to ask if her husband could still live down there, even if he offered to pay her to bring him food. Chung-suk won't take it and pulls out her phone to call the cops. Just then, her family falls down the stairs while they're trying to watch them. Moon Gwang doesn't wait and records them right away with her phone. She gets a picture of them calling each other family names. Moon Gwang and her husband are now in charge. If the Kims don't do what they say, they will tell the Parks. The Kims are made to crouch in a corner while Moon Gwang and Gun-se look around the house. Ki-taek grabs Gun-se, Ki-young hits Moon Gwang with a bunch of peaches to knock him out, and Ki-woo takes the phone away to delete the recording. Everyone stops moving when they hear the phone ring in the house. When Chung-suk gets it, Mrs. Park tells her to make dinner because they have to get back early because of the storm. The whole family gets to work as soon as she hangs up the phone. Chung-suk starts to cook. Ki-taek has tied up Gun-se in the basement. After taking Moon Gwang to the basement while he is asleep, Ki-young hides the trash under the furniture. Ki-woo then goes upstairs to return the diary. Right then, the Parks come back, so Ki-woo hides under Da-hai's bed, and Ki-young rolls over on the table. Moon Gwang wakes up and tries to get away, but Chung-suk pushes her back into the basement, where she hits her head as she falls. Her husband is following a Morse code guide that he has stuck to the wall while hitting his head against the light switches. Ki-taek drags her limp body to where he is. While having dinner upstairs, Mrs. Park tells Chung-suk about the thing that happened to Da-song in first grade. The boy broke into the kitchen one night to steal his birthday cake. There, he saw Gun-se coming from the basement and knew it was him. Because of the ensuing panic attack and foaming at the mouth, he has been attending therapy ever since. They're never home for his birthday. Da-hai almost finds Ki-woo under the bed, but she picks up her dog and doesn't look any further. When the couple from Park goes to their bedroom, Ki-woo and Ki-taek sneak into the living room to find Ki-young so they can leave. But Da-song yells and comes downstairs, so the three of them have to hide under the table. It turns out that Da-song wants to spend the night in the yard while it rains. To keep an eye on him, his parents let him choose to sleep on the couch. When they finally sound asleep, the Kims leave the house and run through the rain to their neighborhood, which is flooding with sewer water. Their apartment is also flooded, so they get as many things as they can before going to spend the night in a nearby gym that lets poor people who lost their homes in the storm stay there for free. Because he is dissatisfied that his father has no solution for the issue, they left the basement. Ki-woo sleeps with the scholar rock in his arms. Before, Moon Gwang died from the blow to the head she got earlier. Back in the bunker, Gun-se tries to use the lights to send a Morse code message for help. Da-song can see and understand it, but it doesn't make sense. Gun-se isn't thinking straight, so he spells something wrong and cuts his forehead. The next day, Mrs. Park chooses to throw Da-song's surprise birthday party, and the Kims have to put on their best friendly faces even though they're really sad about losing their home. Chung-suk needs to prepare food and set up the tables outside. Ki-taek has to drive the parents around to buy all the party supplies while they make faces at how bad he smells. The brothers have to act like smart teachers because they're actually very important guests at the party. Ki-taek and Mr. Park dress up as Indians at the party because they want to put on a show for Da-song. After talking with Da-hai for a while, Ki-woo takes the scholar's rock and goes down to the basement, where Gun-se jumps on him after getting away. Gun-se stops Ki-woo from running away by putting a cord around his neck. Then he hits him with the rock and knocks him out. He then leaves the bunker and goes to the kitchen to get a knife for the garden party. Gun-se goes outside and stabs Ki-young to get back at Moon Gwang. As soon as Da-song sees him, he starts to have a seizure. Meanwhile, Da-hai finds Ki-woo's body and takes him outside to call for help. Ki-taek checks on her daughter and puts her hand on her wound to stop the bleeding. At the same time, Chung-suk jumps on Gun-se and kills him with a barbecue stick. You can tell Mr. Park doesn't care about any of his workers because he only wants Ki-taek to drive him to the hospital to pick up his son. But Ki-taek doesn't want to leave his family, so he throws the keys at him so that he can drive himself. Gun-se then falls on top of the keys that were lying on the grass. Mr. Park goes to get them, but even though it's an emergency that could kill someone, he covers his nose while moving the body. Then Ki-taek runs away from the scene of the crime after killing Mr. Park with the knife. After 2 weeks, Ki-woo wakes up from surgery on his brain. Because his mind is still fuzzy from the accident and surgery, he can't help but laugh about everything that has happened to him. He learned that his sister had died and that his father was missing. He was also caught, put on trial for fraud, and given probation because of the traumatic event they weren't charged for because they were acting in self-defense. He stops laughing when he sees the news story that shows the house that is now empty. This makes everything seem more real. He and his mother don't know where his father is, but the police are following them around because they think they might take them. Ki-woo goes up the mountain and looks at the Park's house. A German family bought it and moved in without knowing anything about its history. After a few months, other stories came up in the news, and the police quit following them. It was there that Ki-woo realized the lights were being used to send a Morse code message. It was his dad, who had been hiding in the house bunker the whole time. He buried Moon Gwang in the garden and ate everything in the kitchen every night to stay alive. Every day, he also sends Morse messages in the hopes that his son will one day see them. Ki-woo writes his dad a message from his old apartment, which he still shares with his mother. He promises to work hard and save enough money to one day buy the house and move back in with his dad.